give us a few words. He's from Bozeman, Montana.
It's always a great joy and pleasure to be here with this parish and all the people, and some of y'all we've known for quite some time. In fact, years ago, many of you probably know, some of you don't, that my wife and I and our sons were living in Southern California, and we were part of that EOC group thing that came in 1987. And so we were with the Antiochians for 22 years, and before we moved up to Montana. The reason we moved up to Montana was quite interesting. Our son had gone to college there, got married, settled down. They had a church that was starting there, but it was OCA. So to move up there and being a deacon, I had to get a transfer and permission from Metropolitan Joseph. And so my wife and I met with him. And it was, it's kind of difficult to be asking your bishop, if you can change to another jurisdiction. It's not the easiest thing in the world. And so we told him the situation, and he said, he says, I'll let you go, but it's because of your family. Since it's your family, I'll let you go. And kind of like, otherwise he wouldn't have been letting us go. But then at the same time, I'm thinking in my head, well, if it wasn't for my family, I wouldn't be asking to go anyway. But I've always appreciated Metropolitan Joseph. And it wasn't but a few years ago, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, that we were back in Santa Barbara because they had built a new large building that they are now using for their worship services. Later on, they're going to build a temple, and this will be their fellowship hall. But Metropolitan Joseph had come there for the dedication, and at the end of it, at the end of the service, went up to venerate the cross and get his blessing. And he looked at me and he says, "You will always be a son of Antioch." And that, you know how he is. I love his accent and the way he talks. But anyway, so it's always been a joy to be with a parish such as this, where we know the people and we were together with them for a long time, and we still are. It's just that things are kind of confounded with this multi-jurisdictional type of thing. And today I wanted to share with you. I know that y'all, like those of us in Montana and throughout the country, are wrestling with this pandemic thing, the COVID thing. And then, right following with that, we have all this civil unrest that is going on. And, it's been a time of a lot of confusion, anxiety, and we've even seen how with our bishops, and especially given multi-jurisdictions, it's been difficult. These are things that our generation or our children, etc., have never really had to deal with on that level of a problem. However, like my parents, and probably for some of you, your parents or grandparents, they had to go through the Great Depression, World War II. So there was, a lot of difficult times, things that are hard to go through. And, for us, especially now, especially with multi-jurisdictions, some bishops do one thing and some do another. It's new for them. It's hard to really know exactly what to do, or that is, we tend to think that. I wanted to share with you, though, something that St. Tikhon of Moscow said. He was here in North America from, I think it was like 1898 to 1907. And at that time, of course, there was only the one jurisdiction, you might say, that was the Russian Church. It was interesting how he was, though, very cognizant of the different ethnic groups. And so, for example, I'm sure a lot of y'all know about Saint Raphael, who was from, I believe it was Lebanon or Syria, and he came over, and he became a bishop under St. Tikhon, and for the purpose of ministering to people who were from Palestine, Syria, and that area. And he also had, that is St. Tikhon, had St. Nikolai of Velimirovich, who came and was ministering to primarily Serbian people, etc. So St. Tikhon was very cognizant of the various ethnic groups, you might say, and ministered to them, the Orthodox people from these different countries. One of the things that was interesting was that he there was a number of his sermons that have been published. They're in this book. I highly recommend them. I just found out about this book. A friend of mine at St. Anthony's Monastery, who's a priest, and also he's from Moscow, Russia, showed me this, and it was really good. St. Tikhon in 1901 went to Galveston, Texas. And as you know, Galveston, Texas is right on the Gulf of Mexico. And he went there because they were rebuilding their temple. And gave a sermon. The reason they were rebuilding their temple is about 9 months prior, in the summer of 1900, there had been a terrible hurricane coming. And it had just leveled and devastated Galveston. And there were like 9,000 people who died just from that one event. And so he's there, and he's addressing them in their time of rebuilding. And what he says, and what is so interesting, is really very pertinent to our time and the difficulties that we're going through. And a lot of it because of the fact that throughout history, you see these type of things happening and people reacting in so many different ways. But what he says is, it is necessary that you have the memory of this terrible, terrible event firm and constant within yourselves, and understand it in a Christian way, as a visitation of God for the purpose of bringing you to your senses as the Lord's care for you. For he in every manner seeks to save again and reestablish what was fallen and to correct our lives. And that was the one thing that kind of really struck me about this sermon, is because he says in that sermon, he says, people talk about, it was the terrible winds and the rain and, the hurricane or whatever. And he says, yes, these are all causes or reasons. But he says they're secondary. They're secondary. We need to understand it in a Christian way. What is God doing? And so often it's very easy for us to not really grasp or get a hold of the fact that God is in control of all these things. He controls the winds. When Christ, the apostles were worried about they were in the boat and the high waves and winds and everything else, and the Lord goes out and calms it all. He's really in control. And so for us, it's really, we need to know, what is God doing? What is our response in terms of what God has done and how we understand this in a Christian way? And he says, when we do this, though, he says, but for what reason was it allowed by the Lord for this terrible event to occur? Was it perhaps due to the sins of this town's inhabitants? Let us not, however, rush with our judgments, especially since the ways of the Lord are often unknown to us. So let us better draw a lesson for ourselves from the calamity that has occurred. And so he goes on then to commend them for, through this terrible time, staying together, staying committed to the church, and reestablishing, rebuilding the church. And, to confess their sins and repent and worship Him and trust Him. And I think this is the thing that, is for us today, too. Because, unfortunately, there are lots of people who only look at it from an earthly standard, the disease, and, are they going to get a vaccine, or do we socially distance, whatever else. Not that we should neglect those things, certainly, but those things are really secondary if you think about it. Because even our being ill or whatever, it says in Psalm 102, who heals all our infirmities. But He also allows those things to happen. And so what is it that God has for us? There's a lot of people that go, well, this is all conspiracy. Who knows? And a lot of people are judging other Orthodox people or hierarchs because they did this and they didn't do that or whatever. It's not for us to do. For us is to look at ourselves, our own community. How do we need to repent? How do we need to help? And how do we, keep this church vibrant and in tune with Christ our God? So I pray that all of y'all, like so many of us, will continue to struggle in faith, and and it's always a joy to be here. I can't tell you how much it is a joy to be here and to see your wonderful church and be with Father Gregory and all of you. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit.
Thank you, Deacon. And thank you, Diaconisa, for being with us today. And, it's always nice to have you. We have a big family. The church is a big family. I'm always amazed at how big our church family is, based on the amount of phone calls that I get in the course of a week. From here, from there, just, wow, I forgot about you, and I forgot. See? So, good that you didn't forget about us, campus students. Okay, one little thought I have, and thank you for that beautiful meditation on St. Tikhon too, Proto. The Joachim and Anna were really in bad shape, you could say, in terms of the world, the way the world looks at things. They were barren. They couldn't have children, and that was worse than any plague in ancient Israel. So they were in a lot of trouble. And people, here's the point, people made fun of them. People persecuted them. They threw them out of the temple, out of the synagogue. They said, nothing to do with us. Get away because you are cursed. You are... Can you imagine? So, this is the point. We get a lot of that, too. No matter what we stand for, and especially if you stand for Christ, you're going to get a lot of that. And they resorted not to any kind of defense or justification or anything. They resorted, both of them, to prayer. One went up into a high mountain, and one went into the garden, and they resorted to prayer. They said, Lord, this might be your will for us to be taking a lot of hits all the time. But if it's your will, it's fine. If you can see your way clear, mercy, to give us a child. And you see how merciful God is? He gave them not just any child. So, when you're being battered by the waves of life, especially from other people, don't do it. What you're tempted to do, don't do it. Don't snap right back. Don't do it. Resort, go take it to prayer. Be a man, be a woman of prayer. And your peace will never be broken again. And maybe even like the people you live with will say, who is this person? They're not their usual self who's always smashing against the wall, They are somehow at peace. It's because here's where the war is inside of us, and the rest we've taken Christ. Take that lesson from Saints Joachim and Anna, the righteous.